You're no stranger to what's going on in the news from your perch at the Department of Justice. How seriously do you think about the power of big, if I could put it that simply, and what it actually means from an antitrust perspective?
Well, we've discussed this before. One of our roles in the antitrust laws is to make sure that when companies get big, and we don't have any problem with companies being big. It's when they get big, they behave properly, and to make sure that the markets are open, that new entrants enter in, new competitors, and ultimately the consumers and businesses will benefit from that.
I'm sure you may have seen this article. Interestingly, there's been lots of good press for our interview, not to mention the president, which we'll get to. But Tim Wu, a law professor, specializes in antitrust, New York Times editorial this weekend, talked about Congress passing the Anti-Merger Act of 1950. But he also said it would be understandable if you assumed it was been repealed, but it remains on the books. It's merely been evaded, eroded, enfeebled by the corroding effect of decades of industry pressure and ideological drift, yielding what he says is hesitant enforcers and a hostile judiciary. How do you respond to criticisms like that?
Well, look, I respect him quite a bit. He's great. He's been very thoughtful. He's been certainly thoughtful on the AT&T Time Warner merger that we challenged. And I don't know if there's been much hostility. I think the laws have been pretty well calibrated. Do we have challenges? Absolutely. But I think those are good challenges and checks and balances on our powers. We go to the court system. We have to prove our case. We have to prove it with good, strong evidence. We also have to prove it with sound economics. And over the last 30, 40 years, we've had a pretty strong and bipartisan consensus on what the balance and the right balance for antitrust enforcement is. Now, are there areas that, do we wish to go a different way? Are there cases we lose? Absolutely.
Right. But do you agree with his contention that, and I'll read here, that there's a direct link between the concentration of business and the distortion of the democratic process?
I don't think so. We have to always be vigilant, make sure. I mean, that's why the antitrust laws were enacted in the first place, to make sure that no single company or any group of companies have the inordinate amount of power that affects our lives. And there's been quite a bit of debate about these platforms and what does that mean? Are they touching every aspect of our lives? Should they be this big? Should the government step in and somehow regulate their growth? And I think,
well, how closely do you look at that issue when it comes to, in particular, and again, we're talking about platforms, whether it be Amazon, Facebook, or Alphabet, the existence of these enormous platforms, the influence they have. How seriously do you investigate it right now at the Department of Justice in terms of trying to get some answers?
Well, we look at it. Whenever there has been challenges, we have, the Justice Department brought a case on the ebooks matter not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, where some publishers and Apple had gotten together and successfully resolved that matter. We are constantly, but we have to be, what we look at, we have to be careful in that we're just there to police the markets. We're not picking winners and losers. We are not trying to choose which technologies. Frankly, we're just not smart enough to be doing that. All we can do is make sure the markets are free for new entrants to come in and topple the old ones.
And do you believe that is the case right now? I mean, we've had this discussion previously, but this idea that innovation is somehow stymied by the presence of these giants who conceivably can prevent capital from flowing to new ideas because nobody wants to fund anybody getting into business to compete with them.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's, actual evidence of that. There might be in some areas, certainly, different investors, but it seems like Silicon Valley and the venture capital world in this country particularly is alive and well. You're having new companies pop up every now and then, but that's what we do. Antitrust laws need to be there to make sure that they do not prevent that next competitor to come in. That was exactly what the Justice Department did in Microsoft 20 years ago. And a lot of people were worried about the power Microsoft had, and particularly when they were trying to suffocate the internet browser because it was challenging their monopoly power in the operating system. And I think that case probably led to a lot of the innovations we're seeing today.